Fairfax County 911, where's your emergency?
A frantic 911 call, a home in chaos.
My name is Brendan Banfield. I'm a federal agent. This is my house. There's somebody here. I shot him. But he stabbed her.
2 people down, one stabbed, the other shot.
He said, drop the gun to Brendan.
The husband and the family's au pair claim it was self-defense. Then, a chilling twist. The au pair changes her story.
It was part of his plan.
And when you say it was a part of his plan, whose plan?
Brendan's.
Prosecutors call it a cold, calculated plot by Brendan Banfield, creating a disturbing fantasy to cover up his wife's murder.
He basically said divorce was not an option.
Did he say why?
Money was involved.
While Juliana presents us with the narrative, it is the blood evidence that you can rely upon without a doubt.
But the defense says there's more to the story that you haven't heard, and that digital evidence will back up their case.
There's a saying, digital forensics doesn't lie. People lie.
Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of a love triangle and a deadly conspiracy as a jury decides, is Brendan Banfield a master manipulator, or was he framed by the mistress living under his roof?
Good evening. I'm Erica Gonzalez, and thanks for joining us for The Case, Au Pair Affair. It's a twisted tale of sex, secrets, and alleged murder. And now, nearly 3 years after that disturbing double killing, a jury is hearing the case against Brendan Banfield. Here's a look back at the crime that captured international attention.
February 24, 2023, Fairfax County Police rush in after a 911 call is made from inside this Herndon home.
Who is the shooter? Who shot who?
Upstairs, they find 37-year-old Christine Banfield in her bedroom, suffering from multiple stab wounds. Nearby, another victim, Joseph Ryan, dead from gunshot wounds. Downstairs in the basement, the Banfield's 4-year-old daughter is home at the time but not harmed. The husband, Brendan Banfield, and the family's au pair, Juliana Perez Magalhães, tell investigators there was a struggle, claiming Ryan was an intruder. They say Ryan attacked Christine with a knife, and that's when they shot Ryan in self-defense.
He was saying, I'm gonna kill her, I'm gonna kill her. And I don't know, he started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too.
Several months pass. The case goes quiet as detectives return to the scene of the crime and notice something unsettling. Police say it appears the au pair has moved into the primary bedroom with Brendan Banfield. A framed photo on the nightstand has been replaced. Where a picture of Christine once stood, there is now an image of Brendan and Juliana together. Even more troubling, investigators hear the little girl referring to Juliana as Mommy. To detectives, it's a moment that changes everything. Prosecutors soon allege this was no random act of violence. They claim Brendan Banfield and Juliana Magalhães were having a secret affair and worked together to plan a murder. According to investigators, Banfield created a fake online profile posing as his wife on a sex fetish website. Using that account, prosecutors say he lured Joseph Ryan to the home on the morning of February 24th. Prosecutors say Ryan thought he was meeting Christine Banfield for a consensual encounter, bringing restraints and a knife as part of the rape fantasy they'd act out. Instead, prosecutors claim he walked into an ambush. Prosecutors dub this the catfish theory, making it a crucial part of their case against Banfield. But the defense says it's not true, saying it was Christine behind the website all along. 8 months after the killings, Juliana Magalhães is arrested, charged with second-degree murder and a firearms offense related to Ryan's death. For the first time, the case begins to move. Nearly a year later, a Fairfax County grand jury hands up an indictment charging Brendan Banfield with 4 counts of aggravated murder and a firearms charge tied to both deaths. The man, once seen as a grieving husband, now stands accused of orchestrating it all. Just a month later, a major development. Juliana Magalhães accepts a plea deal. She pleads guilty to manslaughter. In exchange, she agrees to cooperate with investigators, telling everything in exchange for her release from prison and deportation back to her home country in Brazil. As part of that deal, she gives a recorded confession to police, alleging that Brendan Banfield was the mastermind, the one who carefully planned the killings and manipulated the crime scene afterward.
What did you hear her saying to Brendan as he was stabbing her?
He was stabbing her and then she was just telling him, let me go, I'm gonna die anyways. I'm gonna bleed to death. She was just, leave me here, let me die. And then he was telling her, I can't. I don't know why he said I can't.
How did Christine Banfield's blood come to be on Joe Ryan's arms and hands?
Brendan did.
Brendan Banfield has maintained his innocence. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. And for a quiet Northern Virginia neighborhood, the question still lingers. How did a family become the center of a carefully hidden double life and an alleged double murder plot?
It's the first week of testimony in the Brendan Banfield trial, and the star witness, the au pair, Juliana Perez Magalhães, has taken the stand. Joining me now is Northern Virginia Bureau reporter Drew Wilder, who's been inside the courtroom this entire time. Drew, who is Juliana Perez Magalhães?
As you said, she is the star witness of this case, and the reason is, according to the prosecution, is that she has the entire narrative that they want out there, that they want the jury to hear. But to get that narrative, first, they offered her what the defense called a sweetheart plea agreement.
We all deserved to know what really happened, and I just couldn't hold it. I just couldn't keep it to myself. The feeling of shame and guilt and sadness.
So Juliana's 25 years old right now, but when she came to the United States from Brazil, she was just 21 years old. She came here on a work visa in an au pair program to live and to work with the Banfields. She lived in their home. She made $200 a week. She wasn't making a lot of money, but she had a place to live. She said she didn't really have much of a relationship at all with Brendan for the first few months, but then over the course of the next year, she says they developed a sexual relationship and were having an affair. She was posting pictures on social media. We've got some that were entered into evidence here. I mean, it shows the two of them going out. His face is covered with an emoji the whole time, but there's cutesy photos, his hand on her leg. She said on the witness stand that that is Brendan behind those photos, and they were going out regularly to bars and clubs, having dinner, having drinks, and appearing on the outside as though they were a couple.
All right, you bring up the witness stand. We got to show you what it looked like when Juliana first walks into the courtroom. And I want you to pay attention to Brendan Banfield's facial expressions. He cannot take his eyes off of her, and he tries.
She gets on the witness stand and she starts laying out her narrative, what she calls the truth. And then during cross-examination, which is a very critical part for the defense, cross-examining her, they start talking about all this jail mail that she was sending. And we see this start as the portrayal of a very depressed, very tragic situation for Juliana. She's talking about self-harm. She doesn't want to live without Brendan. She doesn't want to go on in this situation. But then her mood and her attitude and these messages we were shown really starts to change over the next few months.
And we start to see her patience wearing thin, that is with the defense attorney, and specifically around this idea of potentially selling her story for profit. I want to share this now, this soundbite directly from the court. You can hear it for yourself.
You were charged with murder because you shot someone. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
And so why would you deserve something because of that?
Not because of that. I didn't say that I deserved something because of what I did.
I didn't hear any details, so feel free to tell me why.
I'm saying for after, when this is over, for me and my family.
You may not like her. Do you believe her? That is the big question that the jurors will have. NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden joins us next to talk more about that. The Commonwealth says Brendan Banfield was the mastermind in this double murder plot. The defense claims they used the au pair as an experiment to flip on their client. Those details and the other most notable exchanges in the fastest 60 seconds of court this week. Take a look.
We're here today because Brendan Banfield, the man seated behind me, killed his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man named Joseph Ryan.
He basically said divorce was not an option.
Did he say why?
Money was involved.
And the whole reason she was arrested was to flip her against my client.
He just told me how things were going to happen. This is going to happen. You do this, and then you do that, and that's going to happen.
It is the blood evidence that you can rely upon without a doubt. The blood cannot lie.
Joe Ryan was selected.
Yes.
Who chose Joe?
Brendan.
This wound is considered rapidly fatal.
I had a video call with the producer who works with Netflix, and they want to make a movie or documentary about my case, and he explained in terms of compensation, make money, right? Lawyers, producers, everyone tells me to do this, that I have a talent.
Northern Virginia Bureau reporter Drew Wilder with me, and we want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. All right, Kristen, the last clip there, Juliana talking to media outlets with the potential for selling her story. How do you think she has gone over in the eyes of the jury?
I don't think those producer communications boded well for the jury. And I also think the defense scored some major hits on her inconsistencies as well as the selective memory. But look, I think overall, even though she was testy at times, she held her ground. She did not come off as a mastermind. And that's what the important part. Most importantly, the prosecution rehabilitated her very well. And that's what matters, because the prosecution doesn't need her to be perfect. The prosecution just needs her to be credible enough for the jury to keep hearing her story.
And Kristen, we want to talk about the evidence. A lot of forensic evidence came into the record today. We'll show you a few of them. We start with the clothing, Juliana's clothing that started in her bedroom, and then it moves into the primary bedroom where she was staying with Brendan. Certainly it doesn't answer the question of who done it, but boy, does that paint a picture of what was going on under that roof. There's new furniture in the house and in the bedroom, new flooring, new couples photos, and we really got our first look inside the primary bedroom as it looked as a crime scene. Blood-soaked carpets, allegations that Joseph Ryan's body was moved from the dog bed that you see on the top of the screen down to the left blood splatter you see on the floor. We saw Joseph Ryan's shirt where it appears that there was a bullet hole, presumably fired by Juliana, in his chest. We also saw the bloody knife. I mean, this is some really heavy stuff that the jury's looking at, Kristen, but it's not exactly a smoking gun. What do you make of this, and how do you think a jury interprets evidence like this?
It's very sad evidence, and it makes the jury feel empathetic about the loss of two lives. But overall, generally, these pieces of evidence can really kind of be split into two lanes. One, the blood evidence in the house, but then two, what happened after the murder? So you talked about Mr. Ryan's blood and how it was on the dog bed, and there's questions that the defense in their cross kind of brought up. Was the body moved? Was it relocated? And that fits into the defendant's theme, which really kind of goes into that medical chaos. This is not a cold, calculated plan. This was medical chaos on a crime scene that the police failed to properly secure. And that bodes right into their secondary argument, which is that, the police had kind of tunnel vision. They didn't test certain evidence. They only tested the evidence that really was beneficial for what they wanted the conclusion to be, which was that Banfield killed his wife and Mr. Ryan. But the prosecution has a hard pivot with regard to this evidence. And what's that hard pivot? Well, replacement evidence is not evidence of contamination. It's not evidence of a shoddy investigation. It's not evidence of medical chaos. What it is that it shows us, the EMT and law enforcement, they cannot put a red lingerie into the primary bedroom of Mr. Banfield. They can't put up all those new pictures of the au pair shacked up with Mr. Banfield. That type of evidence doesn't lie. That replacement evidence comes from deliberate choices and intent. And that's exactly what the prosecution's point is. Banfield was a man who was trying to erase and replace, not protect.
Kristen, can I chime in here very quickly in regards to evidence and a moment that we all stood almost aghast at. Yeah. There's a moment where a detective details Brendan Banfield being at the hospital and finding out that he has lost his wife, and he is emotional and he is wiping tears from his eyes and blowing his nose. and his hands are covered in blood. And a detective says that he felt empathetic for him and told Brendan Banfield at the hospital to wash his hands.
Without swabbing them for evidence first.
Right. What do you make of that, Kristen?
That dives deep into the defendant's theory of the shoddy investigation, the tunnel vision initially. And that is very problematic, because if the prosecution, as you showed in the prior clip, is relying on the blood evidence, the defense is kind of trying to counter that and inject reasonable doubt by saying you can't rely on the blood evidence because the police did not properly secure the scene, from the initial portion all the way up to Mr. Banfield's hands not being swabbed.
Kristen, I mean, I've covered a lot of trials. I know you've prosecuted a lot of trials. I don't think I've ever seen a criminal trial in which the defense doesn't try to argue shoddy police work. It's classic defense strategy. How much does that actually work in a case like this? Does that get them there?
You know, in a case like this, I don't know that it gets them there, particularly when you find red lingerie in the defendant's closet and you basically see his deliberate plan being corroborated by all of the pieces of physical evidence. I don't think it bodes well in this particular case.
Kristen, end of week one in this trial, the Commonwealth, the defense, who has the upper hand?
Right now, I got to say the prosecution has the upper hand because they're anchoring the jury in what I would call hard physical evidence. Yes, the au pair has some issues with her credibility, but again, her timeline matches the blood splatter, matches the scene. And the after evidence, like the house changes, the gun range attendance records, and the window replacement receipts, and the lingerie, you know, that is a tough story for the jury to digest. And I think the prosecution has them going into that long weekend kind of feeling their story and holding the prosecution's opening statement together.
All right, NBC News legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fed. And Kristen, thank you. And when we come back, a look at the surprising moments in court and what we can expect next week on The Case. Wrapping up week one of this trial, a lot of evidence brought into play, a lot of witness testimony, including from the au pair herself, Juliana Perez Magalhães. I want to get to Drew Wilder now, who has been inside the courtroom every day, monitoring all the things that our cameras have seen, most importantly, the things that we've not been able to see. So Drew, going into week two, what stands out to you?
For me, it had to be those crime scene photos inside of the bedroom. They were gory, they were tough to look at, blood-soaked carpet, but that was the very first time that we've seen inside the bedroom after the crime, and it started to lay out an idea of what might have happened inside of that room.
The highlight of the week was the bombshell testimony from the au pair. Was she testifying or was she auditioning, as the defense would have you believe? But the prosecution came hitting back pretty hard. 911 calls, medical evidence, forensic evidence, and other detectives and crime scene investigators. So the question before the jury at this early stage is going to be, was the au pair's testimony purchased, or is it backed by independent proof?
So we've been keeping track of every witness, every sentence that's been said in a live blog. I want to go now to some of our producers who've been keeping track of this literally with like every keystroke and let you hear from them what stood out to them. What were the most notable moments in this week one trial?
On the first day of testimony, we heard from 4 Fairfax County police detectives who talked about the chaotic scene when they first arrived and potentially mishandling some evidence. We heard about an officer who stepped on the knife that was used in the stabbing. And then the biggest shock for all of us here in the control room was when we heard that Brendan Banfield was allowed to wash the blood from his hands in the hospital after hearing the news that his wife had just died.
What, if anything, did you see him do while you were in the hospital room with him?
He washed his hands.
And before he washed his hands, had anyone swabbed his hands to preserve samples of blood that were on his hands?
No.
Fairfax County now. Where's your emergency?
My name is Brendan Banfield. I'm a federal agent. This is my house. There's somebody here. I shot him.
What I found interesting about day one of testimony was the 911 operator giving us a glimpse of what happened on the day that it all went down. Brendan made sure that he identified himself as a federal agent on the phone, but when the police got there, he didn't do that.
You were charged with murder because you shot someone. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
And so why would you deserve something because of that?
One thing that came out that really surprised me was that she was talking about selling her story and talking to media outlets. I thought that was surprising.
Certainly a lot of big developments this week, and we'll be sharing all of it with you on air and online. For week 2, we have a live blog at NBCWashington.com with updates in real time. A reminder, there won't be court next Monday for the Martin Luther King holiday, so testimony resumes Tuesday through Thursday. There's no court on Fridays. All right, Drew, so you are in the courtroom every day.
Yeah.
Who's there with you?
It is a packed room. I mean, this is the largest courtroom in Fairfax County Circuit Court, and it is pretty full most days. There are a lot of journalists in there, of course, but sitting on the other side of the aisle, we have the victims' family members. There's Joseph Ryan has some family members there. Of course, Brendan Banfield has some family members in there, and you can just see the emotion wash over them. I mean, this has got to be the most difficult thing any family could ever sit through and hear. And then we've also, of course, got the jury. There are they are the focal point, right? Sure. This entire story is meant to convince a jury of either side's story. In a trial like this, you're going to add some what are called alternate jurors. 12 people will ultimately decide this case, but there are 4 alternates that are going to sit throughout the duration of the evidence in case one of these jurors maybe gets sick, falls ill, can't make it one day, then one of the alternates will step in. Right now, there are 9 men and 7 women to make up the 16. All 4 of those alternates are male. So, if this entire 16-member jury ultimately makes it the whole way, we could have a female-dominated jury. Erica?
It's that televised courtroom drama that has captivated viewers and media alike. Among those watching the trial is Marianne O'Donnell, a seasoned Dateline producer who's analyzing the relationship between Brendan and Juliana and how it evolved into a double murder.
You start to realize the human heart is a very nuanced organ indeed. Lots of corners, lots of dark places. What would you do? What wouldn't you do? And you would hope you would never, ever do something like this. And it's a question I ask myself as I'm watching this young woman give her statement. Like, at what point? What was the Rubicon? Where was the Rubicon that you just crossed and you said, I'm all in. I'm going to do this.
The televised case will be part of a Dateline special once the trial wraps.
This is a rare look at the legal process, with the judge in this case, Penny Azcarate, allowing cameras into the courtroom. Now, she might be a familiar face to you. She was also the judge in the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard trial in Fairfax County back in 2022. Of course, that was a very different case. That was pretty much a made-for-Hollywood type trial, right? It was a civil case. It was a defamation case. It went on for almost 6 weeks. It got a ton of social media attention, mainly because people were interested in all of the juicy details between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. But look, the chief judge of the Fairfax County Circuit Court, Judge Azcarate, was commended in a lot of those, true crime aficionados, a lot of the people that were interested in that, because she runs a really tight
I was going to say,
ship.
she runs a tight ship. I mean, down to the minute, the breaks, lunch, everything down to the minute.
And she's a former prosecutor, right? But she does not give any preferential treatment to any side. I've covered a few cases that she has presided over. She is fair. She is incredibly articulate with the way that she wants her trial run. She runs a tight ship. She doesn't give preference to either side, but she does allow for some latitude. If one side needs a little help getting there, she'll let them find that. She wants to present a fair trial, and I think so far this week you can't argue that we've had anything other than that.
We've got more to come. Thank you so much for watching this special edition of The Case, the Au Pair Affair. We'll be back here next Thursday as we look to week 2 of the trial.
Have a good night.